and it could glow.
Okay, so we've got about.
I like your.
We got
I
about
like
a
your
minute.
smile that would light up the room. That's
I
really
like
nice.
that. Okay, cool. So hang on. I'm going to get us started here.
Okay, great.
Hello and welcome to the Dr. Elisa Show here on KUHS Denver, the stream. Thank you so very much for tuning in. And yes, I love being here with you. I say that every single week. If you're new to my show, my name is Elisa. The doctor is a doctorate in educational psychology. And I try to present every week something that ignites a renaissance of spirit within you. That's my tag. That's my line. I think that's my soul's journey, is to ignite a renaissance of spirit in others and in myself. So we're going to have a great guest today. I have an amazing show for you. But before we start that, I do want to give out a shout out to one of my amazing sponsors, veteranspride.org. And you can go there, veteranspride.org. If you've been listening, you know that I set a goal for us this year, for all of us, to be philanthropists at the end of the year. And what does that mean? That donate what you can. If that's $1 a month then in your life, if that's what you can afford, that's your philanthropy. And somewhere to start is veteranspride.org. They make shadow boxes for veterans that are a little bit pricey. And when you donate $1 or $2 or $5, a veteran can have an opportunity to have one of those shadow boxes made for them. So think about that. And then clearly you have your own charities and your own causes you believe in, and feel free to become a philanthropist that way. Just an invitation to you. I have an invitation to you also to join me for the rest of the year. I'm going to shift a little bit. Yes, the tagline stays the same. But the focus of this show is going to be on becoming the phoenix rising from your own ashes. It's a great myth. It's a great metaphor. I'll be using it for the next several shows with different guests, and even on the Crystal Ball Hour, which you know comes up on a Monday. And I'm not going to give you dates right this minute, but you can find me and find all that information on my Facebook site, The Dr. Elisa Show. You can also go to my website, elisarobin.com, and you can see past shows, you can see my blog, you can see some of my academic writing and some of my less academic writing. You can also I have monthly updates and soulscapes, and I will let you know on that site also when the next shows are. Tons of information, elisarobin.com. Okay, sort of amazing. One more thing. I also told you that I have finished my second novel, and I want to give you a shout out to anyone out there who's an author, which simply means you love to write. We write because it's what we do. I had somebody ask me how I was going to publicize my second book and what my thoughts were about getting it out there, and could I get a bestseller. And you know what? I write because that's what I'm supposed to do. Now, if you read it, even better for me. So the first novel is called The Way of the Well. It's a spiritual romance based on a myth of a story I love of Miriam's well. And it's actually really good. You should read it. So you can get it on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. And for those of you who've been watching the Crystal Ball Hour, that myth does show up in this book. Spiritual adventure romance. The second book is called Dark Fire. It starts from a seed of the story of Tamar. And if you would like to see how that one unfolds, you can go to my website and read the first chapter, because it is up there. Okay, that is enough about me. Let me move us forward. And you know what, before we start, wherever your head is, I know the world right now is in a confusing place. Just take a deep breath, because right this moment, just focus on where you are right this moment. I've been doing this all day and actually all week. Right this moment, I am warm, I am safe, I am dry. Right this moment, I can be centered. Right this moment, I can be filled with the gratitude of my health and the amazing blessings in my life. So just for this moment, take a deep breath and focus on that. And then let's try to have a conversation where we stay focused on that. I know it's hard, but we can do it. So I have, let's start with that sort of idea of the Phoenix Rising and how we are reinventing ourselves and being born anew as the year is about to turn, believe it or not. And I have a guest with me. I want to tell you just a tad bit about him. When I met him, I struggle with some of the, what we call the mitzvot, some of the commandments, some of the ways that we live well. And you know, I'm always bringing in my Kabbalah experience, my background, my Jewish experience. And sometimes my mouth gets ahead of me and things come out of it that then later I wish I could pull back. And as we are born anew in this sort of Phoenix Rising, I want to know that my speech, that what I say, that the words, that I mean them, because words have so much power. So I was invited several weeks ago to record a very small segment, but a wonderful segment, on a Clean Speech Colorado site. And you can find this. You can do a Google on Clean Speech Colorado. You can sign up, and there are these amazing videos that you get. And I'm in one of them. And when I went to record, I met this gentleman who exudes a sense of presence and a sense of wisdom and a sense of being very centered. And I thought it would be amazing to have him on the show today. So we're going to talk with Rabbi Leban, and we're going to have this conversation. You can join in by posting questions in the Dr. Elisa show site on Facebook, or I'm not sure where else we are, probably the KUHS Denver site. But Rabbi, thank you so much for joining me today. Could you give us a bit more of an introduction about yourself and just tell us a little bit about, you know, who you are and what sort of your connection to Clean Speech Colorado?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me on your show, Elisa. Thank you for your lovely and your kind words and introduction as well. I'm delighted to be here. I've actually been in Colorado. I've been an educator, Jewish educator here in Colorado for 18 years. And prior to that, I was privileged and fortunate to be able to study from some of the most significant schools of Jewish thought today in Jerusalem itself for about 8 years prior. It was an experience that was very meaningful to me. I was able to avail myself of tremendous mentors, to be in what's called the yeshivas. A yeshiva is a place where people sit and study, and it's a focused study on Torah and the Talmud, which is the broader explanation of what the Torah really means. And prior to that, actually, I'm an American by birth. I was from Virginia, and I was an English language and literature major, and I've written a book or two myself. So we feel like we have a lot in common, and it makes it very, very nice for me to be able to be on your show with you and with your wonderful listeners. I just wanted to also add, the idea of Phoenix Rising is a theme that resonates in terms of, if I understand it correctly, a person who's, one step back, 2 steps forward, perhaps one who's coming out of something, been somewhere, done something that perhaps they would rather not have done, or where they would rather not have been, and able to come out of that and to be subsequently great and achieve things that they really want to achieve, spiritually speaking. And the topic I see just resonates with me personally, because I really was, I guess that fits my narrative or my personal biography, my story. My mother finds it quite humorous that I'm the sort of reformed Sunday school dropout that became the Orthodox Jewish rabbi. So that I guess ties right in. I was not necessarily raised with a tremendous amount of significant Jewish background or knowledge or education, spiritually oriented from my childhood. But as a young adult, after, kind of exploring the world a little bit and looking out for value and for something worthwhile path, the direction, something to invest in. So I was very fortunate to find that my own background is I'm descended from 100 generations of Jewish people, and I'm therefore Jewish. So I was able to recognize in my own heritage that opportunity. When I took that opportunity to be in Jerusalem and to study, I found tremendous richness, spiritual value, an incredible opportunity and a life to lead that I had previously been unaware of, and embraced it. And I think that much of of who I am today was a product of making some meaningful spiritual decisions as an adult, which we can all do. And so that seems to me that's what speaks to me perhaps about the theme of Phoenix Rising, that we can all make appropriate and meaningful spiritual decisions, and we can take ourselves and our lives in directions that we haven't already been traveling, paths we haven't already been traveling, places we haven't already been, accomplishments we haven't already achieved, and lead a very, very rewarding, fulfilling spiritual lives, and a constant opportunity for growth and benefit. And so really, just to finish my just short introduction of, I guess, as you asked me for myself, I try to be a spiritual resource to the folks in the community here. I'm just speaking from Denver, Colorado, where we are somewhat neighbors, and even though your listenership is all over the world, and the globe has become a lot smaller, my primary responsibility are the rich and healthy spiritual lives of the Jewish communities of Colorado. I don't have a formal membership. I'm not a synagogue rabbi, but I'm an educator and hopefully a resource and an access point for lots of people who want to learn more and to enrich their own spiritual lives. So
that was an amazing introduction. So thank you. I love the way you tied back into the Phoenix Rising, and the notion that you didn't exactly say this, but it's how I heard it. That every day we have the opportunity to make a choice in our life that can lead us in a rich spiritual direction, to renew ourselves, to return to our true self. So I love that sort of notion with the Phoenix Rising. So let's move this a little, because this is great stuff. And can you just talk about Clean Speech Colorado, and because I want to focus in on that. And let me frame it for you. My show is about igniting a renaissance of spirit in others. And it seems that you have found a personal passion and a renaissance in helping people understand the power of words and speech. So can you sort of link Clean Speech Colorado to your own passion and talk about that for a few minutes?
Absolutely, delighted to. The Clean Speech Colorado campaign that we're now in the middle of volume 2 of our second campaign, started as an idea over many years, in which we really found over here in the organization, the Jewish Experience, where I'm the director, we found that one of the most inspiring topics that we teach is Jewish mindful speech, classic, timeless ideas, universal ideas about how one should speak. And all the words coming out of our mouths should be like this, not like that. In truth, it became much more timely in the last 5 years or so, let's just say, as there's very, very obviously a very severe sense here in America and in our communities of division and strife and vitriol, and we feel a great us and them mentality, and with a lot of uncertainty and just a lot of really ever-present negativity in the public sphere, and it invades our own lives, and it affects us and the way that we react with people even that are close and dear to us, unfortunately. And it made this kind of a campaign very, very, very timely and relevant and necessary. And so what we did was we gathered the interest and involvement of 65 or so of the different Jewish organizations across the state of Colorado to band together to bring all of our joint constituencies 30 days of lessons on mindful speech with these timeless Jewish background and perspective. Speech in and of itself is one of the most significant ways in which we interact with others and affect our world. Is a very spiritual background to the human faculty of speech. If you look early in the Torah, which outside of the Jewish people is referred to as the Old Testament, but if you look at the very beginning of it, in the story of creation, it says that God took from the dust of the earth and he created a body for the first human being, and then he breathed into him the breath of life. And on that, the Aramaic translation, Onkelos, actually describes that breath as creating in man a ruach mamalalah, which means a speaking spirit. When humankind becomes animate, when we become alive, when we are human because we are a speaking spirit. We speak. And a little bit deeper level, the idea of breath, when someone breathes, they breathe from within themselves. The breath comes from within and out through the mouth. And as it were, if we understand then that God, as it were, breathed into us the breath of life, he breathed something of himself into us. That divine spark that's within each and every one of us is God's breath out through his mouth into ours. And when we speak, we are actualizing, and we're taking some of that little bit of divine soul and divine spark within us, and we are sharing it, we're sending it out into the world in the form of words. It's a very beautifully spiritual faculty that we have, perhaps the essential spiritual faculty of a person. Furthermore, if we just look a little bit more at that initial Genesis narrative of the Torah, we see that God used speech to create the universe, and he said, "Let there be light," and there was light. So the act of speaking is God's creative energy, and we also have been given that divine faculty. We create reality by the words that we say. When we speak to other people, if we speak in a pleasant, loving, encouraging way, then we can create a pleasant, positive environment for us, and we can influence and impact people quite significantly for the better. And unfortunately, the opposite is also true.
That's true.
So the Torah has many specifics and guidelines for us about how we communicate with one another, whether it's verbal, frankly, or whether it's today, it could be digital, it could be a text message, it could be a facial expression across the Zoom airwaves. And we have lots of guidelines, and the goal of the campaign was to inspire as many people as possible to take their speech more significantly, see it as the great faculty and power that it is, and to be mindful, to be careful, and to wield that power carefully.
Okay, so that's amazing, and thank you. And let me again sort of repeat back to you some of the things I heard, because I want the audience to get as excited as I am about your speaking. So one piece is that even speech can be a holy act, it sounds like, because it's given to us from, and let me just add this little piece. If you're listening out there to KUHS Denver and the Dr. Elisa show, please remember that this show is spiritually multilingual, and I've said that over and over again. So if I say God and you want to think universe, if I say prayer and you want to hear meditation, please just align those words that work for you, because I think we're talking about the same thing, and I don't want, again, the words to get between us. I want them to unite us. So, Rabbi, what you're talking about is that in one way, right? That words can unite us or get between us. That words and speech, and nowadays facial expressions and text messages, can carry an element of spiritual growth, of perhaps even holiness at times, and that is up to us to make the choices to have that happen. And that's not just a Jewish notion. I believe we would find that in practically every spiritual tradition. Would you agree with that?
I certainly would agree. I'm not an expert on many other spiritual traditions other than Judaism. Like that, I can't comment on. But I absolutely can concur with you that we very much believe that that speaking even outside of the context of prayer or meditation, speaking to one another casually can absolutely be a holy act, and it is a holy act, or a profane act if it's done negatively, if it's done poorly and hurtfully. As a general spiritual perspective, since of course that's the theme of your wonderful show, a Jewish spiritual outlook, and I'm sure that this an outlook for all of humanity can be as well, that we believe that holiness is achieved as the sum total of many, many, many well-made decisions throughout our moments of the days of our lives. Holiness isn't just for an occasional experience that's highly religious in nature, but holiness is achieved by mindfully choosing to conduct oneself in all ways, in all things, and certainly in the way that we speak to one another in an appropriate and an elevated way. That makes a person holy. We can speak even to each other in a way that is devoid of gossip, of slander, of verbal mistreatment, of ridicule, of sarcasm. If we can take those things out of our interactions, if we can instead replace them with gratitude and with encouragement and with positivity, of lifting people and sharing wisdom with them and good advice and encouraging them in their lives, that is itself very a holy act. And frankly, as I was saying, I think it's a very beautiful idea, very important idea, that we recognize that our holiness is achieved by many, many, many simple, regular, routine things when they're done right. Speech just being one of the most common.
That is so lovely, because it opens it up and makes it accessible to everyone, right? I mean, that I could focus on that. Let's say I focused on it just for a month or a year or whatever, and that is a pathway of spiritual growth open to everyone. I want to add that for many of us, speaking kindly to ourselves, I think, would be part of that. I know that I have, in my private practice, when I work with individuals, so much of what I want to say to them, and often do say, is you treat yourself rudely. Don't say those things to yourself. Don't be mean. So I'd like to dig in a little bit and do a little definition stuff, if you're okay with that. Last year, Clean Speech Colorado focused on Lashon Hara, and this year it's Onas Devarim. So can you just take those two apart for us and start with Lashon Hara, which is Hebrew, and tell us what that means and maybe the deeper spiritual meaning of that? Sure.
So, as you said, last year's campaign was focused on one particular mindful speech topic, Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara is the Hebrew term for an evil tongue. And it could be used as sort of a broad term about anything that we might say that we shouldn't have. But specifically, and this was the topic of the campaign, it refers to speaking in a hurtful or harmful way about someone, primarily in absentia. Meaning to say, if you and I, Elisa, would be having a conversation about someone else who wasn't present, then the laws of Lashon Hara, the guidance of Lashon Hara, would be to refrain from gossiping and slandering, speaking in any way that's negative about them. That in and of itself is really a top drawer issue for the Jewish people. Our history revolves around our efforts, sometimes more successful, sometimes not as successful, but our awareness of that as a significant issue, and our efforts to maintain our clarity, our mindfulness, our avoidance of Lashon Hara. So that's when we're speaking about someone in the third person. That was the first year, volume 1 topic. This year, our second campaign, volume 2, we're dealing with another particular mitzvah, another commandment, another particular aspect of mindful speech, and that is Onas Devarim, which means to cheat someone verbally, really, to afflict someone, to hurt someone verbally. And it's really talking not about how you and I would speak about a third party, but how we speak to each other. How are we addressing each other? What kind of emotional reactions are we causing in one another? And the mindfulness would be to avoid the Onas Devarim, the unpleasant feelings of shame, embarrassment, offense, insult, hurt, anger, anxiety, anything that's uncomfortable that our words might cause in the person we're speaking to, is what we're learning about avoiding and taking care of, avoiding this year. That's our second year topic. Okay. Just like by means of differentiating between the two, maybe I'll also mention that a common denominator between the two is that both of them are really couched as avoiding the negative. By and large, there's actually a beautiful verse in the prophets, in the later books of Tanakh, and also again referred to as the Old Testament outside of Judaism. King David in Psalms wrote, "Sur me'ra va'aseh tov," which means to turn away from bad and do good. And our sages say that there's a certain order that's being presented. That if a person wants to improve their lives and wants to elevate themselves, they should do it in that order. They should primarily, first of all, try to step away from some of the negative choices and behaviors and involvements that we have, and afterwards to replace them and fill that space with the positive. So when we talk about mindful speech, primarily we focus on avoiding the negative. We consider ourselves we don't think so much as I'm entitled to be spoken to properly, but we think of ourselves as being responsible not to be harmful to one another. And therefore the first part of care, caution, and improvement in speech is to be careful first to avoid the negative and not to speak lashon hara or onas dvarim, not to speak negatively about someone in absentia or to cause an unpleasant reaction to the person with whom you're speaking.
Okay, that's lovely, because the first part is do no harm, right? Do no harm first, which I think I have to admit that this is often a challenge for me. The lashon hara is I have to catch myself at times, and so I'm still working on it. I do love the notion of I'm not there yet, but I'm headed in that direction. I didn't ask you this before when we talked off before the show, but two stories about both of these come to mind, and I'm wondering if you could just talk to us about why we use these kinds of stories about our speech. One is it's probably a famous story about a woman or a man who goes to the Rav and says is trying to sort of repent for evil speech, and is told to take a pillow, right, and scatter the feathers. And so I'm going to set you up for two, and maybe you'll link them. So that's an amazing story for me about the power of words. The other is our speech. Isn't our speech also at times referred to as shooting an arrow? So I know they're very different, but can you play with those a little bit just because I want the audience to really get, everyone listening, to get this power we have when we open our mouths. So can you talk about those two for a minute?
Absolutely. I also wanted to just comment on the first thing you said about, you're quite genuinely and vulnerably shared, you don't consider yourself to be perfect at it yet. I think that's where we all are. And I just want to register that the perfect people in this note are few and far between, if there are any. We're all working on it, and that's why we have this campaign and how we can involve 50,000 or so community members here in the effort. This year, Governor Jared Polis, the governor of Colorado, actually declared November Clean Speech Colorado Month, and he did so because we all recognize that we all need this. You're not alone. I just want to join you there. We're all alone. We still have work to do.
Thank you.
Both of those two comparisons, the two stories that you shared, are really apt and appropriate. So let me address them and expand. I'm going to take them in the opposite order that you shared them. The first thing that you said is that sometimes our words and the way we speak is compared to an arrow. Mm-hmm. An arrow, certainly when you think of it as a weapon of war, could be contrasted with a sword. A sword, if we were at odds with someone and we were there facing off and we drew our swords, mm-hmm. we could immediately change our minds. We could call it off. We could make peace, and we could put our swords right back in their scabbards, right back in their sheaths, and put them away. Unfortunately, the opposite is the case with an arrow. Once an arrow is shot, you can't rein it in. And so too, we have to appreciate our words are not swords, our words are arrows. And an arrow is something that when you launch it, it's out of your control and it can't be reined in. You say something negative about someone, and there's not much, unfortunately, you can do to fix that. It is done. It is said. And you whisper something negative in somebody's ears. You tell somebody, "Oh yeah, so and so, yeah, let me tell you about him," and they get a negative impression about that person, maybe that they thought well of previously, and it's very hard or impossible for them to put that negative spin on that person that you just gave them with your Lashon Hara, to put that to bed. It's very difficult or impossible. It's more, our words then, negative words are more like an arrow than a sword. In fact, when we talk about this idea of verbal cheating, we take it back to its sources in the Torah. The same word that we use in the Torah, that the Torah uses to prohibit verbal mistreatment, is used for financial mistreatment. That means cheating someone financially. So you take advantage of someone financially, you take advantage of someone verbally. It's the same problematic verb. And the Talmud actually points out that verbal abuse, mistreating someone with words, is worse than mistreating someone financially, exploiting them financially, because financial restitution is much more easy to make, but restitution to repair the damage caused by the words we say is very difficult or maybe impossible. And that brings us to your second story, a very famous story about a person who it was coming. The story, as I heard, it was almost the Jewish high holidays. And everyone is busily trying to make amends and to right wrongs and to make peace with their fellow. And this fellow came to his rabbi, his spiritual guide, to say, how can I fix the fact that I have spoken Lashon Hara, I have slandered and gossiped and said lots of negative things about people? How do I fix that? So he said, okay, I'll tell you what you do. Take this feather pillow, go up to the top of the synagogue, and shake out the feathers from the pillow in the wind, and come back. So the fellow thought that was a little odd, but he did. He took the pillow, shook out the feathers, and he came back. He said, okay, is that it? Do I have to do more? And the rabbi said, now you have to go and collect all those feathers. He sounded aghast. He said, collect the feathers? It's impossible. The wind has spread them to the four corners of the earth already. He said, and the rabbi said, and so too are your words like that. No sooner can you collect all those feathers, no sooner can you fix the harm that you've done verbally than you can collect all those feathers. The story is meant to show us and to demonstrate the severity of the problem. When we say negative things about people, we're changing people's lives potentially. We're altering their relationships. We're harming people in a way that can't be fixed. The words can't be taken back. You can't go collect them. And that's meant to really hit home that we should be so hesitant, so careful. Until we become really good at it, we should be very, very careful as we develop our skills of speaking mindfully and positively only, and avoiding harming others with the power of our words.
Thank you so much for playing with those two stories for me, because on the surface they sound different, and you wove them together in such a lovely way. Let me also, hey, if you're just joining me, it's the Dr. Elisa Show here on KUHS Denver, The Stream, with my amazing guest, Rabbi Leban, from Clean Speech, Colorado, which if you just Google that, Clean Speech, Colorado, you're going to get this website, and you'll be able to listen to the videos, you'll be able to listen to the updates. There's some really, really great tools on there. So, Rabbi, this is so great. Thank you so much for being on. What I'm wondering is, we're talking about how we should do this, right? Do you have some hints? Because, like I said, and it's almost as if it's just so tempting. This person did blah, 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 right? And I think it's so weird and odd and how strange. And I really want to go share. I just want to go share it. And I know I shouldn't. I know there's no point in sharing it. All right, actually, I'm going to ask you a couple questions. One is the how I watch my language. The other is how I discern the difference between. So let me wrap this a little different for you. I have a conversation with person A. It's very strange, and I'm going to go see my doctor or my therapist or my something, or maybe my rabbi, and I'm trying to figure out how to deal with the situation. Okay? Let's deal with that one first, because I think that's where everybody has a sense, well, no, sometimes I have to share those stories. Is there a way to do that? To share a story that says I'm struggling with the situation without Lashon Hara?
I think how is the active question. So that's really your question on two levels. How?
Yes.
How do we go about fixing things? How can I talk about something I need to talk about and do it in a way that's appropriate and proper? So those are the how is the question. I first want to start by sharing a classic formula for change from a Jewish perspective. Change is what we're all after all. We want to develop, we want to grow. We don't want to be stuck in the same rut, in the same place. We want to do things better, differently, more. And how do we do that? So a very important and very broadly relevant how, a model for change, for being different and making changes, is what this campaign is all about, frankly, is education and awareness. And basically that means we need to understand what it is we're looking to be and to do. We need to know and to educate ourselves and understand what is it that I want to move towards. Mm-hmm. And then awareness, I need to be constantly made aware and reminded of what it is I want to do. Little incremental moments of awareness consistently over time lead to change. So our goal in the Clean Speech Colorado campaign, which everyone can access themselves at cleanspeechcolorado.org, is to have a 3 minute moment every day. You'll just take a short time every day for 30 days to learn a little bit more about the parameters of mindful speech, and to remind yourself and to think about it, and to become aware and make it part of your consciousness, that over the course of 30 days, just a little bit of time spent consistently will get you there. That is an amazingly powerful, and you can use that in many different contexts for change and improvement. A little bit of incremental effort with awareness consistently over time. That's your formula. So for that reason, we have these little rubber wristbands that we give out. For those of you who are able to see me, I'm showing you mine, but I'm wearing it. It's just a little thing you put around your wrist, but it's enormously effective as being a reminder, daily awareness, and I become aware of it. And the more times I have a constant awareness, the more likely I am to actually be successful being careful. And the more that I am careful, the more that becomes my norm, and I create new habits, I create new neural pathways. For those of you the neuropsychologists out there, that's the way that works in today's understanding of neuropsychology. You create neural pathways, and then that becomes easier, that becomes your new behavior, that becomes you. You retrained yourself. So that's the how overall. In terms of your specific question, how one could go about talking, let's say with a counselor of some sort, even a good friend, frankly, where you need to have some help. You need to get this off your chest. You need to get some advice. You need to speak this painful situation or this incident that you had. You need to speak it out with someone. How do you do that if we're being careful not to repeat and say negative things? So that's a great question, and we addressed it for an entire week of last year's Volume 1 Clean Speech Colorado curriculum. And the underlying principle here is that when something is constructive speech, there are times when it becomes an exception to this prohibition of saying negative things. We can all imagine that there are times when we know something, we've experienced something, we're aware of something that we have to share, because maybe there are those who are in a situation of potential harm or risk, and you have to speak up. You can't stay silent. And that's very important to remember. If there's a constructive need to say something, even though it might be negative, you might need to say it. You might have to say it. So the prohibitions of saying something negative is when there's no constructive purpose to it. When there is a constructive purpose, you may need to say it. Now, you still need to say it carefully. And the reason we spent a whole week on that idea last year is because there are still guidelines about how you should go about seeking that constructive purpose that would lead you to want to say this. And there still are criteria for saying it carefully and not causing further harm by what you say, and making sure to take every precaution in the process. of not causing harm while you're trying to help. But especially in a very common situation, a person wants to talk to a friend or a partner, a spouse, or coworker, roommate, or a counselor, or psychiatrist, or rabbi, whatever. You want to talk to someone and get some advice, and you need to share with them a very unpleasant incident, which would be saying something negative about someone. One way to do it is to simply leave out the name and the identity of the person that you're speaking about negatively. Because if the listener doesn't know who you're talking about, then you're really okay. You're not causing anyone any harm. You're just getting a sounding board. You're just getting some personal help. So if you can leave out the name and the identity of the person you're speaking negatively about, then that works. That's a good way to do it. Sometimes that's not possible, either because it's integral to getting the help and advice you need to know who we're talking about, or sometimes it's by virtue of what the story you're going to tell, the person you're talking to is going to know who the story is about. And then, again, like we said, there still could be an exception here, and you would be still permitted to say such a negative thing for the constructive purpose that we mentioned, for the getting the help that you need. And it is reasonable. You don't even have to be speaking to a professional counselor for this to be relevant. A friend, a sounding board, I mean, that's what a friend is really for, is to help you to understand things that you're dealing with, to get a third-party objective voice in your life. We should all have such a friend. And those are the ways to handle it. Does that help?
Yeah, so let me see if I can say it back to you. Part of it is my intention. If my intention is I need help dealing with this, and I can tell the story in a way that protects the other person as much as I can, but helps me untangle my feelings, my emotions, or the situation, then that I'm doing that the best I can. So it sounds like that does work. I think you know, I was an academic dean and professor for about 25 years. There were times we had to share information about students. We're passing a student from one class to another, and often had to talk about maybe their writing ability. That's very, very common. In no way did I ever want to have the other faculty think poorly of the student, because we actually know that students perform at the level we expect them to, and I always wanted the other faculty to expect greatness so that the student could rise to that expectation. What I found was I would be able to say something about student A, who was still struggling a little with their writing but was really improving and showing great promise. So I could state the problem, but also then state the growth. I could say it in a way that opened an opportunity for a student. Would those two, one, my intention to get help for myself, and the other and my intention to help another person, would those two ways then of speaking be acceptable?
Certainly a teacher is speaking about a student, mm-hmm. is a situation where that is a clear constructive purpose. We're trying to help the student succeed, and we're trying to discuss how we can best help the student succeed. So that is clearly a constructive purpose, the right intent. Mm-hmm. It sounded like also what you mentioned, if I understood you correctly, that you talk about where the student currently is and what are their opportunities for growth. Mm-hmm. It sounds like you were also very clear to hold the conversations in that positive way. Some of the other guidelines to clarify or to add to that would be one should really only speak about and share, communicate something that they know personally to be true. So something hearsay, we would call that in English, like I heard this about the person, would not be something that you would repeat even in that kind of a place. Nor would we be able to exaggerate. You can't exaggerate. You have to be extremely careful not to exaggerate one iota, to say things exactly as they are. And I think you were very sensitive to this, and what I heard from you already, one should be very careful not to cause any undue ancillary harm to this person we're speaking about and trying to help. So that would mean that their other teachers should only should continue to be able to think about them positively and to be able to to bring out the best in them in their classes and contexts.
Okay, great. So I can feel a little bit about some of those. I have a question for you. You mentioned volume 1 of Clean Speech Colorado. Is that available? If somebody goes to the website, can they review anything from last year?
Yes, it is. We did a very, very brief overview in this year's Clean Speech campaign on day 3. So if you go and take a look at the lesson that was released this year in volume 2 about on day 3, which was November 3rd, because the days correspond to the months of the days of November, then there is a quick review there. But if someone would like to have the entire curriculum from the volume 1 from last year, you can contact us on the website and we'll gladly get it for you. And I believe that if you even go to cleanspeechcolorado.org, the website, and you go to the press page at the bottom, you can download it there yourselves for free. There's no cost for any participation. We have the generosity of some wonderful sponsors and donors. All of this material is being offered at no charge. So people can access it by going to cleanspeechcolorado.org. They can get last year's curriculum, and they can enjoy the benefits of this year's curriculum as well.
That is wonderful. So I don't want to take too much of your time, but I do have just a couple last questions I want to ask you. One is, what still inspires you? You've now been doing it for 2 years. You have this rich history, and I thank you so much for sharing your experience of rediscovering and being sort of that phoenix rising. So sharing that of yourself and your experience in Jerusalem. What still inspires you about this work?
You know, I've said many times that I feel very blessed. I feel fortunate. Like, I'm the biggest recipient of all my own efforts, frankly, because since I'm so busily involved on a 24/7 basis, it feels like these days, in educating on this topic and trying to share these beautiful, timeless lessons from the Torah, from Jewish wisdom to the world, of mindful speech, and all of the personal benefits that we receive, that we, the general feeling of wholesomeness, the improvement of all of our close relationships, just a general positivity that we live with. I'm certainly inspired by all the benefit that I personally receive, but more than that, I'm also really, it just keeps moving me forward when I get an opportunity to talk to you and your listeners and to share these thoughts, because I know that they are so essential. They're so critical. We're struggling in a world right now that is rife with vitriol and all of the worst possible examples of name calling, of public humiliation, of denigration of character, of both directions of either side of the aisle, and it affects us, and we're all reeling from that. It's a terrible it's a terrible world if the person is sensitive to it, and I mean, God forbid, I don't mean that the world is a terrible place, but I think that there's a lot of negative role models out there, and I think we have to be really careful. So I'm inspired and passionate about this, as you asked, to share what I believe very strongly, and I see and hear time and time again from people who will check it out and participate, that this is a real path to solutions. We can learn to have even difficult conversations in our lives successfully. We can learn to argue and champion the opinions that we hold dear, and we can do so effectively. We can be more cognizant, more sensitive, and we can have a genuine state of peace at home and in our circles with our friends and our coworkers, and to me, to be able to share those lessons, which are, these are the goal of the creation of mankind, as we started the show with. When God created humankind, He does so with the hopes that we will develop a peaceful society. We are to create peace with one another, and this is the way we do that. So to me, it's a constant, it's a passion, and it's a love, love affair with the topic. And I really just want to thank you again for welcoming me on your wonderful show. And I hope that we've in some small way provided something that will be beneficial to you and your listeners. I think you've been marvelous, and I am so glad you've been on. And I'm actually just going to throw you a curveball because of something you just said. It occurred to me that the word shalom, and of course I am not the expert in Hebrew, but the word in shalom actually means to bring to wholeness. Can be used, is that right? Can be used to complete, like a circle, to make something
full. And so that our language is not just about bringing peace in the way we think about peace, right? A lack of, an absence of violence, perhaps, but in bringing wholeness. And would that be one of your last, I'm trying to, I think I'm probably setting you up for this, but is that possibly one of the gems that you might leave us with about our speech, the power to bring the world to wholeness?
I think there's very little to add on the wonderful thought you just shared. The word shalom, peace, from Hebrew is from the word shalem, which means whole and complete. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly right. The finish line for humanity is to get us all together in a whole way, in a loving way, in a peaceful way, and that is very much achieved by all of the things that we've talked about today in your show. You said it better than I did, Lisa. I think you're great.
Thank you. So I'm so aware of your time. I'm going to let you go. I got 5 minutes to wrap my show, but I'm going to let you go because I'm sure you have people knocking at your door. And I just want to thank you so much for being on the show, because this was wonderful. And we did not get any questions, but if I get any questions later, I will send them to you if people are interested. So thank you so much. And I'm going to
thank you very much. Blessings to you and to all your listeners, and thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, so thank you. I'm going to get back to the rest of you. That was Rabbi Leban from Clean Speech, Colorado, which is something you can Google. You can do a search on that. And this crosses every religion and every spiritual path. It truly does. Think about when we're trying to grow spiritually, and if we simply focus on our power of our voice, of our words. I'm an author. What is the power of those words? And what if I simply focus on inspiring or igniting a renaissance of spirit in others? I don't need to anger. I don't need to create discourse. Discussion? Sure. Think about the power that you have as an individual to bring to wholeness the world around you with your voice. I loved that. I hope you liked that original sort of image of our speech can be holy, our breath can be holy. And if the word holy doesn't work for you, spiritually advanced, it can take us away from our ego in a more sort of Buddhist sense. That there is something there that we can enlarge and that we can gift the world with. I love that notion of that, we sort of exhale as we speak. And so I am giving of my spirit to the world. And I definitely feel like that when I'm sitting in front of this mic. I have to tell you, I have a sense of obligation. It's a great blessing. You know me, right? You know me by now. I adore being on radio. I love talking with you. And I know there's an obligation I have to provide something for you that ignites within you that phoenix rising, especially this year. So many of us this year have felt that our shell has been burned off, that our skin, that we've sort of cracked through an old way of being, that we have walked a gauntlet of fire. And I have to tell you, in this myth of the phoenix rising, the phoenix knows when it is time to light that flame, to burn off the old, so it can be born anew in a more beautiful way. I just wrote a blog on it, and I'd love to have you go to elisarobin.com, which is my blog, and read my most recent blog. Please, please, please. Yes, I write because I'm a writer. I have to write. I'd love it if you'd read it. And just send me a thought, one little thought, a happy face even would be great. I would adore that. It would mean so much. Because that's the journey I want to take us on in the next several weeks. How we walk through. I'm going to actually give you basically the class that I do and that I sell. I'm going to give you that over the radio, spread out over a few weeks here, about becoming the phoenix rising in your own life. Because this year has challenged us in so many ways and continues to do so. And we can show up as our best selves as the person that we want to be. We can be the change. We can create the world that embraces and that is loving and kind and is safe and is peaceful, as in wholeness, where we bring it to wholeness. I hope you loved my show today, and you need to tell me, remember? I really need a little feedback here. You can go to the Dr. Elisa Show on Facebook. You can go to, just find me, Elisa Robin, on Facebook, and let me know. You can also find me on Twitter, and I do believe we're live streaming this show on Twitter, and you can find me on LinkedIn. Oh, and if you go to elisarobin.com, my email is there, and you can connect with me. I am still doing individual readings. Yes, that's what I do when I'm not here. And I have packages on my site. And I also do what I call an SOS, meaning you just need to talk to somebody for maybe half an hour, maybe an hour. And you can also work with me that way. I can do the channeling that I do on the Crystal Ball Hour. But if you have your birth information, including the time of birth, I can run your chart, and it gives us a richer experience. So, I hope you enjoyed the show today. I hope you found within yourself something waking up that maybe has been quiet, sleeping, a little depressed in this last year. That something in you, a spark woke up, and you're ready to set that fire to the old self, to the old beliefs, to the old limits, to the old fears. Because trust me, it's been a scary year. I know it. So scary. But we can do this together. We can come past our fears. So thank you for joining me on the Dr. Elisa Show here on KUHS Denver, the stream. Stay safe, stay well, stay inspired, and come back and visit me. My next show is same time, same place in 2 weeks. Stay well.